We are so excited to have Allyson and Wes Felix joining us today. You may have heard of Allyson before. She's only the most decorated track and field Olympian of all time. That's quite the title. She's won 30 medals, incredible, 30 medals. And she's been on the cover of Time magazine as one of the most influential people of the year. Her and her brother, Wes, founded Saysh after Allyson experienced some gender injustices in her career during her pregnancy. Their goal was to create an encouraging and supporting community for women alongside a line of athletic sneakers. So we're super excited to chat about their journey from the track to the boardroom. Allyson and Wes, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks so much.
We're excited to chat. So actually, the first thing that I want to jump into, obviously, we've got a bit of a sibling dynamic going on, right? This is a nice sibling session for the day. Wes, you're 2 years older, right?
Yes. Yeah, 2 years older.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to talk about how you both found running, right? Wes, did you find the love of running first? Because your background is there as well. And then Allyson, did you separately just decide that you wanted to become a runner, or was this because you wanted to be like big bro and you wanted to do things that he was doing? Like, let's talk about that early dynamic growing up together.
Yeah, totally. So I can start it off and just say that running was one of those things that I don't know if any kid just like loves running. And so, I was not the one that just loved running. I wasn't just running around all the time, just saying, absolutely love this. But I did love winning. And so that's what I think kind of started getting me hooked was, it was like just field day at school. And, there were these races and you just realized, maybe you were getting to the line a little bit faster than other people. And so you were like, well, let's do that again. I think that's fun. I like getting to the line first. And so found track kind of that way. And we moved to a new school. And at that school, track was a fall sport. So it was just the first thing you could go out for. So went out for it. Back then they had me as a high jumper, which I don't know what anybody was thinking there, but was a high jumper and really fell in love with the sport. And, I think Allyson was out there at the track meets and all of the things, but I'll let her take it on how she really found it.
Yeah, I was the little sister who was just tagging along. I'm sure I annoyed Wes all the time because I wanted to do whatever he did. So if he was playing basketball, I'm playing basketball. If we're riding bikes in the neighborhood, I'm right behind him. So when he started running track, I really took an interest. And then I was at a different high school than him. And I didn't really have a bunch of friends. And so him and my dad were like, you should go out, just like meet people. So I kind of stumbled into it. And I had always, growing up, I was always like known as like Wes's little sister. Like, I don't think anybody even like knew my name. So, he was playing basketball first and he was doing really well. And then he was really fast. And so literally it was just like, I'm Wes's little sister. And then once I started like running, I absolutely fell in love with it and met those friends I was looking for, but literally, stumbled into it. And it was, just because I was chasing after him, like always.
I can super relate to that, of course, growing up, always being the tag along little bro. And then more recently, though, the tables kind of flipped in the athletic space with running. There's a reason we titled this Running the Business, and we're so excited to talk to you because this has been a personal rabbit hole we've been going down, is trying to find that thread of what relates between like our newer love of just running and endurance and ultras and things like that, and how it relates to the mentality that you have to bring to running a business. So we're going to get into all that. Chris, over to you.
Yeah, so we'll get into the similarities between running and business, but first I want to keep on the Olympic thread and on the competitive running thread, because Allyson, obviously racing has kind of defined your career for the last 18 years or so, I believe, but you recently retired. So I'm curious, what was that last race like for you and that decision to be done with the competitive racing? I'm sure that was difficult.
Yeah, it was. The last race was just very special. I kind of had two moments, like one at World Championships where it was like the last time on that huge stage, and just, it was on home soil. And so getting to just take that in and just feeling really appreciated by, the fans and everyone who's kind of been on this journey with me. So it was really special. And then had a moment in my hometown of LA where I had like my true final race. And that was special because I was surrounded by like day one supporters and family and my daughter, all my loved ones. So that was, it was just really emotional. And now, I think it's slowly setting in, and I think it will be challenging, just not having that structure, not having the thing that I've loved doing for so many years. So I'm also excited to see like what my relationship with running looks like as I move forward, and how, that fits into my life. And I'll miss the competitive, side of things and racing and all of that. But I'm so grateful. And obviously I'm really excited about, this next great challenge that I have.
Do you still like race your daughter to the car in the parking lot, or like race to the next house at Halloween? Because I would be doing that all the time.
Well, I'm definitely like, doing what my family did with me growing up, which was never letting me win. So yeah, my daughter has a lot of years of coming in second place, and I will definitely be, making sure that happens until I can't do it any longer.
I do the same with my son playing basketball. Like he goes up for the shot and I just swat it like he's an adult, and he's got to learn, right?
You have to.
Now, Wes, your trajectory is similar, but you stepped obviously into sports management, doing the agency. So like what was that kind of like pivot in your life into business like?
Yeah, it was it was a really hard transition. And I think that's something that I was telling Allison as she was getting towards the end of her career, is it's hard, because it's your identity for so long. And it's pretty rare that you are fully identified as one particular thing, and then all of a sudden that just stops. I think Allison, because of her success, she's always going to be Allison the Olympian on some level, because she's a legend. So she created, it's not going to go away. Michael Jordan's still Michael Jordan, and he can move on to new things, but it doesn't get rid of the basketball part. For me, it was totally different. It was like you were always Wes the runner, Wes, oh, he's an All-American, Wes, he's sponsored by Nike, and then it's just gone. Then all of a sudden you're just Wes, and like that was a shock to the system. And so it was really challenging, and probably took a couple of years before really kind of like finding my footing again, and transitioned out of competing and into the agent side. And that was also really hard, because I'd started my business just on my own. I didn't have a partner. My partner was Allison, and so we just kind of went in and we figured it out. And it was really lonely, so that part was a real challenge. But then I think that, you slowly start to build that world around you. You start to gain your footing, get that confidence, realize there's so much competition around business. So you still get the competitive juices flowing. And, I think it sounds crazy, but there's still quite a bit of balance compared to athlete life, even though founder life, could never describe it as balanced. But yeah, so it was quite a transition, but I really enjoyed it.
So when you just got into the sports agency and you didn't know much about that industry and how it all worked, did you have mentors? Did you have coaches? Like, how did you fast track your success in a space you didn't really understand so well?
Yeah, absolutely. I always say that I don't know what my parents were thinking when they let us do this, but they must have known what they were doing on some level. They had some level of confidence in me and in what Allison and I were building. But the first thing I did was I said, there's a lot that I don't know, and who can I go to that might help me? And I reached out to Serena Williams' agent, Jill Smoller. And I just called her office and I was like, hey, I'd really love to talk to Jill. And her assistant's like, yeah, no, you're not talking to Jill. And, it's
This
probably
was like a cold call?
Cold call. Yeah. And I even found Jill because I was like, well, what's a good female athlete career to model? And it was Serena Williams. She's doing great. Like, who helps her? Oh, this lady Jill Smoller. Let me call her. And so about 6 weeks of trying to get through, and finally, this would have been 2010. So Facebook, was not new, but was still a bit, you used it in a different way. And I just reached out to her on Facebook and I was like, hey, I've got this idea. I'd love to talk to you. And she wrote right back, and she was like, why are you reaching out on Facebook? Like, call my office. And I'm like, I've been calling your office for 2 months. Like, I just can't get through. And she was like, come in tomorrow. And so I came into her office and we sat down, we talked. I told her a bit about, what I thought Allison's potential was and what my vision was for her business and for her career. And she said, I really like you, and I really like, what Allison stands for. Let's do it. And so then I left, and we started working together. And that next year, I think in total sponsorship, we were in the 7-figure range, and the year before that, it was like $35,000 or something like that. So there was this really big change, and it wasn't because of me. I think it was really what I give Jill so much credit for is she's so patient with me and let me ask all the questions, but also she provided an access to information that I didn't even realize I didn't have. And so it wasn't so much. A lot of people said, like, why would you cut her in on the commission? And a lot of people said you don't need it. Allison is she's already a big enough name. You're going to be able to talk to the brands. They're going to be interested. And they were completely right on that. But what they couldn't do was know what that deal should actually be. The best I could have done was known, this big company may offer X amount of dollars. Does that sound like a lot? And yeah, we're like 2 kids from like inner city LA, like that all sounded like a lot. So it was like, cool, let's do it. But what Jill really brought was an understanding of what the deals should be. And so we would start off meetings, and I'd take the meeting and I'd learn a bit about what they wanted to do. And, and they'd say, yeah, and we're really interested in an offer. And I'd say, okay, great. And I'd go back, and then I'd call Jill and I'd tell her what was going on. And then I'd say, like, all right, so I'm going to bring you into the next call. And she's like, okay, great. We get on the call, and, it's an entirely different thing now that they know that I'm not just Allison's brother. Like, there's actually something real behind it. And what I say that Jill really brought was, a deal that might have been 10 cents. She told me it should be $1. And then we were able to go and do it for $1 instead of the 10 cents. And yeah, we still work together all these years later. And we even co-represent another client together as well.
That's so amazing. I think that there's 2 huge lessons there. The idea that you don't know everything and you want to reach out to someone that's way ahead of you. I think it feels out of reach for a lot of people. Like, they wouldn't make that cold call, but you did. You just figure, oh, they'll never respond to me, they'll never write me back. But you had the perseverance to keep sending those messages, keep contacting the assistant. And when you got through, it was a game changer. So I think a takeaway for everyone is that don't be afraid to reach out. That's one. And then the second thing you mentioned is cutting someone in so you have a smaller piece of a much bigger pie is something I think a lot of entrepreneurs wouldn't do. And I know early in Trainual, I had to think about who I was bringing into the business, either as partners or advisors or investors. And I think it's a really important decision for entrepreneurs to make. So very important lesson there. I appreciate that.
I think even the third thing there that you mentioned is, like, they said 10 cents, it should be $1, right? And that's something that so many entrepreneurs have to learn early on, is that, like, they're typically undervaluing themselves and what they have to offer and bring to the table, whether they're billing for, design work or doing a website or consulting or anything like that, like just trying to get off the ground. Like, you got to know your worth, but you can't know it unless you have, that external kind of mentorship and benchmark to look to, right?
Absolutely. Because you can think that your worth is one thing, and you just don't know, and I always say, like, that is the access that she provided, is she was able to tell me what the numbers really should be. And then we could go after the deals and go after them aggressively.
So I want to pull at this thread a little bit more, because I love this story. And I think, like, both of you have such an interesting perspective of working with brand ambassadors and influencers and the sponsorship side of the business, right? And that's been one of the early strategies we use to grow Trainual over the years, is working with influencers, doing influencer marketing, celebrity ambassador, programs, things like that. And something that I think would be really tactical and amazing for the audience here tuning in is to understand how to best work with the people you want to sponsor, with the influencers, right? How to approach that the right way. Because you mentioned Nike, both of you, of course, were with Nike, now not so much. And you've been on both sides of the good and the bad of that relationship, right? And so I think it'd be amazing, maybe Allison, if you want to start with like, what's the right way to work with somebody who you want to be an ambassador of your product, be an influencer for your business?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And I think the first thing is like, it has to be an authentic fit. At least that's the way that like, I feel like it should be. You don't want it to be fake. You don't want it to be manufactured. Like you want to be able to work with someone that, believes in whatever you're doing and like wants to live it out. And so when I think about, just my past and just where I've been, for me, I've really made a commitment that, it has to be real. It has to be something that I can be proud of. And I think when you start there, that's like the type of ambassador that you want, who is going to spread the word because they believe in it, because they stand behind it, because they want to get excited about it authentically. And it really just makes things easy. Like when you're telling the truth, when you're doing something that you like really believe in, it's so easy just to authentically share and to live it out. And so for me, that's kind of the first place where I always start is like, okay, does this make sense? And even when I think about like working with companies, it's like, okay, maybe it's great, but maybe it's not the best fit for me. Is it something that really aligns with what I'm about and with my mission? And do I think it has impact? Like that's something for me, like there's so much more than just financial value. I think like, okay, is this going to move people in any way, and I really find a lot of value in that.
Yeah, and I think that there's something, really an experience I had once where I was talking with someone with a brand, and they were pitching an athlete, and they kept referring to the athlete as an asset. And it was just so dehumanizing, and I think that it's remembering that there really are real people on the other side of this transaction, and so there is a transaction, there is money that's being exchanged for a promotion of a brand. Like that's okay, but let's be real about what that is yes, there is a transaction between two people, and a brand is just still a collection of people. So, that there's a transaction between two people, and don't forget that there are people on the other end of it. And then I think the other thing is, be honest about what the relationship is. So something Allison and I experienced is, this idea of like, oh, you're part of the family, you're part of the family. Like it's not a family, family is something entirely different. Family is a real thing, and it's a very important thing. And that's a word that I think gets thrown around so quickly. You start a new job and day one, you're part of the family. And I think that it's, that's got to be earned. I think that you can become family, potentially, but at Saysh, we very intentionally will not call it the Saysh family. We're a team, and that means that we're going to show up for each other. We're going to have each other's backs. We're going to support each other. If you need a shoulder to cry on, like the shoulder's there, we're going to go through it together, but we're not family. Because at the end of the day, if you're not performing, you'll be asked to leave. And that's not how you treat family the same way. You don't say to Allison's not going to say to her daughter, like, well, you weren't obedient, so like now you're out. Like that's family, something different. Yeah, you don't. It's different.
Only in the mafia.
So
then you should be out
exactly.
Yeah, I think there's some families who wish that they could put some people on, onto free agents.
No, but it's such a good point about the team and family dynamic. You're right. This is not a family. A business is a team, and it's hopefully a collaborative team and a healthy team, but it's not a family. I think a lot of people use that family example to guilt people into working extra hours and doing things that they might do to support their family, and that's not healthy in a work environment. So I love that you said that. And also that asset word, like you probably saw us both cringe. I would be like an instant deal breaker. I've heard a saying, even with your team members, your employees, staff is a disease. It's not what you call people. And so I don't even like saying that word, but it's true. You know, we're surrounded by people. But let's get into Saysh, because you have a really cool story with how you brought this to life. And so can you share where this idea came from? What was that moment that you said, we got to do this?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, with like a lot of the great ideas in our family, it started with Wes, but it really, came about organically. We went through a very difficult time when I decided to start a family. I think, a lot of people might be familiar with the story, but basically I was at Nike for almost a decade, and the culture, regarding women in pregnancy, in track and field as a whole, there was like this culture of silence. Women would either hide pregnancies to secure new contracts, or the contracts would be paused. And it was just very difficult. And I really saw so many women struggle. And I feel like even for myself, like no one sat me down and told me like, okay, you can't have kids until, your career is done. But I think I never saw it, and it wasn't that it wasn't happening. It was that it wasn't at the forefront, and it wasn't, it just wasn't, the story wasn't being told. It wasn't celebrated. But what I was seeing was my teammates, my friends, going through the hardest time, struggling, losing sponsorship, trying to figure out how they could do this, figuring out ways to bring kids along, and having to frankly exit the sport way earlier than they needed to. And I think women are capable after they have children, but they have to be supported in the right way. And so I went through a big ordeal where basically I was asking for maternal protection. So what I was asking for was that the way the contracts are set up, there are bonuses and reductions built into contracts. So you go to the Olympics, you win a medal, you get a bonus. You go and you don't, you get a reduction. And you have a baby, there's nothing in place to protect you. So that's what I was asking. And ultimately, I was told that I could be given time, but it couldn't be for everyone. Like they weren't ready to set that precedent, for it just to be the standard for all female athletes. And I really felt like that just wasn't okay. And I think because over this course of time, I became a mother, and I'm looking at my daughter, and I'm thinking about, the world that she's going to grow up in. I'm like, this cannot be the case at all. And I was terrified, absolutely terrified to speak out on it, because obviously it's this massive company, and I knew that I still wanted to compete. So I wasn't sure what that would mean if I spoke out. But Wes actually told me something when we're going through this whole ordeal. He was like, you can use your voice, even if it shakes. And I think I just really held on to that, because for me, I'm a person who doesn't want to rock the boat. Like I'm a people pleaser. Like it just was so far from what made me comfortable. But I think I felt just deeply like I had to do something. So I did. We wrote a New York Times op-ed. We shared the story. And shortly after, sharing that story, they did change their policy, and they do offer now protection for female athletes, and other companies step forward as well. And, the industry really shifted. But all that happened, I parted ways, and I was still, competing in hopes to make it to another Olympic Games. And that's when I came to Wes, and I was just basically frustrated. I was just tired, honestly, of like asking companies to see my value. And he was like, why don't we just like do this ourselves? And I'm like, you mean like do what? Like build a company, like build shoes for me to be able to like wear in the Olympics? And he's like, yeah. And I guess for me, he's always been like this visionary and like this dreamer, has all these like massive, ideas. And for me, I was just like, but like how is that going to work? And then the more that like I thought about it, and it like really sat with me. I felt like, no, you're right. Like, here's an opportunity that we create the change and we don't ask someone else to do it. And so we stepped forward with this super ambitious, idea. And we started Saysh, our lifestyle brand for women, and we launched. And I think the highlight of my entire career was probably making it back to the Olympics, crossing that line and doing it in the shoes that we created, and then seeing them out in the world, on so many women's feet.
Yeah, and I would
really
just add to it
unbelievable.
that there was this period where, what we thought the problem was just Allison didn't have shoes to run in the Olympics. And so, we set out to build that shoe. And so the shoes she runs in, they're racing spikes, they're crazy light, they're this specialty tool. It would be really hard to build a business around them. And so it probably was a horrible idea, because all I was thinking about was like, yeah, you need shoes, let's start a company, we'll make shoes, like, you'll wear them, people will probably buy them, like, it's fine. And we talked with a former Nike employee who ended up becoming our developer, is now one of our advisors. She developed our first product, and as we were sitting there, she was like, yeah, I think we could do this. This is great. And I was like, amazing. This is the part Allison doesn't mention in there from my perspective is, I said we should start a company. Let's do it on our own. And when she said, you mean like start a shoe company? Like, there was this part of me as older brother that was like, oh yeah, that sounds fully insane. Oh yeah, that's not a good idea. But I think I've gone too far now. Like, can't back down now. Yeah, let's start a shoe company. Yep, we can do it. And so I'm so glad I didn't really know what we were taking on. But what Tiffany, our developer, said was, she said, shoes aren't made for women. And I remember looking back at her and saying like, yeah, I know, it's so bad, it's so horrible. And she was like, I don't know if you're like really getting there. Like, shoes really aren't made for women. I was like, yeah, I know, like, it's awful. And she's like, yeah, I still don't think you're getting it. And like, almost a little bit annoyed. I was kind of like, okay, well, explain it to me then. Like, what am I not getting? You're saying shoes aren't made for women. I'm saying it right back. Like, what am I not getting? And she went back to the very beginning of how you make a shoe. And she's like, a shoe is based on a last. She's like, an elast is just a mold. That's the pattern that's formed around the foot. But the last is just, it's a foot. And she's like, and all of those feet that lasts are made off of in sneakers, those are men's feet. And and I'm like sitting there and I'm like, okay, I'm like, yeah, but Tiff, if that's the case, then that means there's no such thing as women's shoes. And she was like, yeah, like, that's what I'm saying, there's no such thing as women's shoes. And so my next question was, well, then when I go into Foot Locker and there's shoes on one side that are for men and on the other side women, what's the difference? And she was like, nothing. And I was like, okay, well then, like, what is the women's wall then? Like, what is that? And she was like, that's marketing. And I was like, yeah, that's not marketing. That's lying. Like, that's entirely different. That's not marketing, like, that's not saying, oh, this is kind of good, we'll try to make it seem like it's a whole lot better. That's just full blown, we're telling you this was made for you. It really wasn't. And what that immediately stirred up was what Allison felt during, and what I felt along with her going through that journey of fighting for maternity for female athletes. It was then, again, being overlooked. It was being taken for granted. It was this idea of, look, we're telling you it's all for you, and it's really not at all. And so then, we set out to build, yes, Allison's racing shoes, but what we really realized was that our real problem was that women are being overlooked by the brands they're most loyal to. And as we started studying other companies, we were realizing, well, wait a minute, that company that's only for women, like, that was started by men, and this one was started by men, and that's started by men. And we heard about a company that was, getting ready to develop shoes for women. And as we were learning a bit more about it, the lead designer was named Todd and was a male. And I was like, well, wait, like, you're about to go design shoes specifically for women, and the best person you thought to do it was a man? Like, are there no, it was all just so mind-blowing and confusing. And then a few months later, I reached out to Tiff and I was like, Tiff, I woke up, I had this thought. What what's a women's size 9 then if shoes aren't made for women? And she was like, it's nothing. It's a sticker. And I was like, so what do you mean it's just a sticker? And she was like, yeah, it's just a sticker. It doesn't mean anything. It's just a sizing sticker. And it really hit me that, measurement doesn't have gender assigned to it. We look at women's shoes, we think that's a real number, like it's not a real number based on anything. It's literally a marketing tactic, and if you go to other countries, European sizing, it's just a number. There's not a women's 39 or a men's 39. It's just 39. It's an actual unit of measurement. And over here, we focus on trying to convince people to buy things that are not what they actually are. And so we have a women's 9 and a men's 9, but it's just a trick, and I think that when we realize that, then it's okay, this company actually needs to exist. And it's not about shoes. It's about so much more than shoes. Shoes are a product, but what we're really trying to solve is that it's people being just directly misled, taken for granted, like not being seen. And I think it goes right back to when we talk about, an asset or calling someone family. It all feeds into that same thing. It's, no, I'm just trying to take something from you. I just want something from you, and I'll do whatever I need to do that. But that's we need better than that. So
this is mind blowing to me. And I know when I was doing my research and finding this out, I'm just like, is this real? Are you serious? As I'm flipping through. And when you found that out, did you just like call Allison and say, hey, did you know, like, guess what? I would get so mad. And like, it must have just lit you on fire to create a brand to solve this problem. And so I'm curious, outside of the product, how are you advocating or spreading the message around this? And how much of a balance is it between PR of trying to get the word out about this and actually building a product you're selling?
Yeah, totally. I'll touch on it quickly and then toss it to Allison, because I think, when you were saying, just how infuriating it's unbelievably, it's disappointing, like it's really disappointing. And I think that, we were really excited because when you said, wait, is this real? That was something that we knew we were going to run into. It's like, well, what's your data on this? Like, where is that coming from? Because Nike's not announcing that they're making shoes based on men's feet and selling them to women. Like, neither is Adidas. And to be clear, like, Nike's an easy target to pick on because they're big, but like Nike is made up of 75,000 people. It's not bad there. Like, it's not just this evil empire. Like, there are people who probably have put profit before other things, just like at most businesses. And, so we don't have this deep hatred of Nike, and also really proud of them around the maternity protection that they stepped up to improve. But I think that there is something super important there, that if the greatest marketing company maybe in the history of the world was making shoes specifically based on women's feet and just decided to keep it a secret, it probably wouldn't be the greatest marketing company in the history of the world, but that story's not out there either. No one's saying, hey, we made this based specifically on your feet. And we got really excited when Lululemon decided to enter the market with shoes the same way that we build shoes based specifically on women's feet. So now you don't just have to believe Wes and Allison. Now you can just go to Lululemon and you can see that they are also now starting to make shoes based on women's feet, which for us, that's success. Success is, we really want our business to succeed, to really do well. But we also want to create change more than anything. And so seeing a player like Lululemon enter the space and say, we're making shoes specifically for women, I'm excited to tell people, go check out their website, maybe buy our shoes instead of theirs, but because a guy named Todd made theirs, but I would say that they are doing the right thing, and we're not afraid of that. That's not a competitor. We celebrate that and support that, and I think that that is what needs to happen. And if our company ceases to exist because Nike decided they're going to make shoes for women and Adidas decided they're going to make shoes for women, and we're just the small player that disappears, but that change is created, you know, Allison and I have both said that is success. And if any of our investors are listening, that will never happen. We will not let it happen. But
but that
you
is
know,
good. That's like, it's like why
success.
nonprofits want to solve diseases, right? They want to not exist anymore, and that is success. And so having a true mission like that can really drive the business. I appreciate that. Also, as you were talking, I was remembering from my childhood this movie, What Women Want, where I think they were actually like doing women's shoes for Nike. Like whoever was the actress, I think it was like Helen Hunt or Jodie, like she should be a Saysh ambassador and be like, no, you know what? Women want actually shoes that are made for women. That's it. That's like, and buy Saysh.
Right, because didn't like Mel Gibson like read her mind and steal her
Yeah.
idea for the actual pitch? Yeah,
There's an ad there. There's an ad there for you
Yes,
guys.
there is.
I
I'm
love
like
that though.
scribbling notes.
That's yeah, that's so important. Such a note. So everybody write that down. It's like when you're competing as a commodity, competitors matter, right? But when you're champion change, competition is welcomed. I think that's awesome.
Very cool. So I also read that you back before you started Saysh had a partnership with Allbirds, and I'm curious if being around them as like a shoe startup kind of infused some ideas, or what were you able to learn from that you baked into Saysh's DNA?
Yes, I feel like I've been waiting to tell this story one day. Allbirds fired me. It's the only time I've ever been fired in my life. It felt horrible. But actually, I look back now on kind of our journey with Saysh, and I'm like, oh, okay, that makes so much sense. So I was at Allbirds, helping them with brand partnerships as a consultant really early on, probably year 2 or something like that for them. So it was really, really small. It was a lot of fun. Joey and Tim, their founders and CEOs, are 2 incredible guys, just like brilliant minds. But work ethic to back it up. And I really loved the time there. I felt like I learned a lot about how ambitious they were and how what they were creating was possible. And so, you know, it was way too early for brand partnerships for them. So I kind of joke and say they fired me, which kind of felt like they did, but it was too early for brand partnerships for them. And I think they really were smart they trusted their customer. They really leaned into their customer. I would cringe every time I heard them talk about how comfortable the brand was. And I'm like, that's great. Let people find that out when they put the shoes on. You don't need to your marketing doesn't have to be comfort. Like, oh, comfort just sounds like the place where like cool goes to die, you know? And this was all pre-COVID. And so, you know, I just it made me cringe, but I really respect how they stuck to that, because that's why their business, I think, became what their business ultimately grew to, was because their customers said, we love that your shoe is comfortable. And they just gave more of what their customer wanted. They didn't try to change it into solely the brand they pictured in their head. You know, they got it to a certain point, and then they started listening, and you saw it just grow and grow and grow. And so that was really cool to watch. But when it was time to make shoes for me and Allison, I remember telling her, I mean, if Joey and Tim can do it, we can do this. And so it did, like in a huge way. Like Joey and Tim really inspired me around what was possible. And I'm so grateful, you know, that they fired me, because maybe I wouldn't have started Saysh. Maybe I would have been doing brand partnerships for Allbirds.
That next step is often, I don't know, people fear change, right? Like I think a lot of people, as they're going into a next chapter of their career, whether it's quitting or being fired or ending a self-identifying career as an athlete, right? It's like the next step is always scary, but the next step is full of opportunity. And just reframing that, like I love that you're so thankful for being fired and can reflect on that in really positive light. That's great. Can I ask a selfish question though? Right now, I feel like when we have a software company, thinking about starting a shoe company is just mind-blowing to me. Like going into textiles, like trying to figure out fabrics and like soles and the production and the manufacturing, like how did you go about that?
Yeah.
Allison, you want to jump in? You're both just like, yeah, it was hard.
I think we both had like the same feeling of just, at those beginning stages of just like just feeling overwhelmed. But I'll say, like, once we did like dive in, I think it was making sure that we really brought on people who were just well experienced, who had done this. And I was just fascinated by learning the process. And Wes talked about Tiffany, who really, I think she was just our first point of just kind of understanding, how shoes are made and the process of it all. And then, working with some incredible designers. And I think there's something really special also that, these shoes are made for and by women. And for me to be, a part of that process and just to see how it's all developed and what happens at the factories and all of that. I mean, we both grew up loving shoes and big sneakerheads. We could get like one pair of shoes for like the whole year. And we used to wash them with a toothbrush and like, we were pretty obsessed. So for us, I mean, as kids who grew up that way, it was also just this fascinating process stepping into this industry that, was something completely new for us. But the learnings were just, massive, but also like so much fun along the way.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Allison,
And
can I
it was
ask
also, oh, sorry.
I'll say, no, sorry, Wes, jump in just a second. I was just wondering, the last, you said the mold, right, for the shoe. Is that from your foot, Allison, now? Were you in the process there?
Not specifically, just due to all of this coming together during the pandemic, but I do kind of like, I feel like that's also why I didn't realize that shoes hadn't been made for women for so long, was that because being a runner and, I was with Adidas when I was, 17 years old, and then Nike after that. Like my shoes I always had like shoes made for me. And so I didn't realize, racing shoes. And so I didn't realize, that the shoes that are going to retail are, are very different than that. And so it was a lot of learning along the way for sure.
Got it. Wes,
Yeah,
sorry to cut you off there. Go for it.
Oh, no. Yeah, I would just say that it was, it was really daunting to start, but we had no idea what we were getting into. So it was, at the beginning, you were like, okay, what are the steps? You find a developer, you find a designer. How much is it going to cost? We have to open up molds. Like, okay, great. And then we get materials. Where do the materials come from? And you kind of broke it down to this like 10 item checklist of these are the steps. And then when you start the steps, then you realize each one of those steps had probably another 100 more items underneath it. And that's when you really got into it, you're already in, and I think that I always say a lot, and Allison and I talk about how if we knew what it was going to take when it started, we would have never started. So I'm so glad we didn't know what it was actually going to take. And then, the learnings, the very fast learnings around logistics and global supply chain during the largest global supply chain crisis, that we've experienced is also makes it where we don't know what normal feels like. We don't know what like regular level, because we just started it when we started it, and everything was very, very hard when we started it. So I hope that we got this real shock to the system, and later on we're going to go, oh wow, so that's actually not as hard as we thought, or that's actually much, much cheaper, because when you're watching shipping costs go up based on the cost of oil, and you're saying like it costs how much to get our shoes from there to there. We do know that hopefully it only gets better, and not worse, not more expensive.
Only up from here.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, can you run us through I know everything you're doing is really woven into this mission, and you have this maternity policy of a return policy. Can you explain what that's all about? And also, where did the idea come from? How do you have like your ear to the ground or understand what your customers would really resonate with?
Yeah, the maternity returns policy is something that we are just so proud of. And so basically, a lot of people don't even know this, but a woman's foot can change size when she becomes pregnant. And a lot of times that change in size is permanent. I found it out when I became a mother, and I'm like, wait, you're telling me my foot is not going to go back to the original size? And it's kind of a crazy feeling, but just one of those things that a lot of moms deal with. So what we do is if you have a pair of our shoes, we'll give you, a new pair in your size. And just this idea of, we see you, you don't have to make a choice between, motherhood and anything else, and just another way to support women, completely, and really also wanting to like push the industry and say that this is a way that we can show up. And so the idea really came from, again, one of those gems from Tiff, who developed our first product, and it's something that she had always really wanted to do and not had the opportunity to do it, and it was kind of like high on her list, and we're like, well, wait, why can't we do that? Why can't we show up for women? And so we're super proud of it, and we hope to really push the industry and say that this should be something that we do.
Yeah, I love that. It's again, it just shows how dedicated to the mission you are. When you come up with ideas like that and you take the brave steps to say, yeah, this could financially cost us, but in the big scheme of things, we have more to gain than we do to lose. We're really staying true to our mission. I think it just shows that you've got that North Star. You know what you're doing.
When you're setting your like North Star goals, right? Like that company mission, I mean, you talked about the step-by-step framework of breaking down the process of production when like approaching producing a shoe is a massive challenge. You think about this North Star of this mission you're working towards, and it's a big goal, but you're breaking it down step by step, right? How much of that do you think comes from how you've approached an Olympic career or a track, any track career of racing, of running? Like, what is the parallel there of how you approach these kinds of goals?
Yeah, I think that's the thing that I am the expert at. I always say, like, to be an Olympian, you have to be like a little bit crazy, because you get an opportunity every 4 years. And for me to run for about 21 seconds, and you mess up and you have to wait, another 4 years for that opportunity. So for me, I've always kind of looked at life in like 4-year chunks, because that's how my goal setting has always been. It's like, okay, the long-term goal is, 4 years down the line. Okay, let's break it down. What am I doing this year? What am I doing this month? What am I doing this week? And how do I get there today? And so just really taking that mindset, to this new venture, and really just, relying on that skill set. And yes, in this world, it may be called something different. And it's not that I don't have that experience and I don't know, but I'm figuring out, okay, this is what this means here. And really relying on that. So I feel like for me, I know how to overcome. I know how to get through obstacles. Like that's what I've done my entire life. And it's just, bringing that confidence to the team that the storm is going to come. Like we know that, like, and for me, it's looked like injuries. It's looked like losing sponsorships, losing races by hundredths of a second, and dealing with major failure and disappointment on a massive stage. Like I know how to deal with that disappointment and how to pick myself up. So it's just bringing that to a new space. And so I feel like it's really prepared me, but it's just really finding that confidence and understanding that I still have the skill set and I'm still going to put it to use. It's just kind of reframing what it looks like.
Yeah, and I think that something that is so great about Allison and I getting to work together on Saysh, but also in our other business of getting to manage her career and work with her from that point. And we also had the same coach when we competed. And so this idea of perspective being, how are you going to look at this journey? Are you going to look at the journey from the starting point or from the finishing point? And what our coach Bobby would always say is, you start at the goal and then you work your way back, instead of starting at where you are and trying to figure out how you're going to climb the mountain. And if you work your way back, then you start to see the pieces of, okay, so at this point, I need to be doing this. So at stage 4, here's what I need to be doing. Well, if that's the case, then I've got to be doing this at stage 3. And if that's the case, I have to do this at stage 2, and, and really working backwards. And so, so I think that's a mindset that, Allison used throughout her career. but just a way that we really try to tackle the business too. And instead of looking at it and saying like, oh no, we're in the middle of a storm, it's like, yeah, no, we know there's going to be a storm. That's fine. If we can work our way back, then those things all feel a whole lot more manageable, to be able to tackle.
It's funny, Jonathan's always said he thinks in the 4-year chunks too, but for him, it was like high school was 4 years and college was 4 years. And for you, it's like, no, I'm in the Olympics every 4 years, like every 4 years for pretty much my whole life. So I'm going to remind Jonathan of that next time.
Well, my wife was a Team USA figure skater as well, so she shares the 4-year mindset in the training cycles too. But yeah, I laugh when you said that, because that's totally how I think about it. And now it's been 4 years since we founded Trainual.
True.
And like we're looking at this in these kinds of chapters as well. It's funny.
So what's 4 years out for you right now? What's stage 4 for Saysh right now? What are you working toward?
Yeah. Do you want to take it or do you want me to go?
Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I think that, 4 years from now, like what we really set out to do was, there were all of these new questions for us of like, okay, what's your exit? Are you trying to do this? Are you trying to do that? How are you going to return capital? Like all of these things, that just felt like people were asking not because they really cared, but just because that's what you're supposed to ask. And so for us, when we set out, we said like, okay, so like, what is the goal here? What are we actually trying to accomplish? And we knew the goal was change. And so we started there and we said, okay, well, I don't know if that works on this goal, because I think we're creating change by just launching this company. And that also gave us this confidence that I think also goes back to perspective. Sometimes we look at our goals as this very big, far off, distant thing, and you forget that you're accomplishing goals along every step of the journey as well. And so, so it was great to be able to have our biggest ambition be create change, and to be able to say, okay, well, I think we did that, so we can check that one off. All right, so then what comes next? And let's keep on making change each step of the way. And it really is, how do we build a company that creates belonging? How do we create a community of women, of allies? How do we create a real community? And that is, for us, community is not a collection of customers. It's a real community where people find something that means something to them, where they can find other ways to connect with people. And I think if we do that, we create belonging. That kind of means we're creating purpose. And I think that at that point, we'll reach whatever financial goals there are around a business. But we want to get it to as many people as possible, and we want as many women as possible to feel seen. So yeah, that's what 4 years from now looks like. And maybe it's an acquisition, and we're able to take the shoes to even more people. But who knows? A lot happens along the way.
Allison, anything to add there? 4 years out for you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm in line with that. We had a moment about a month ago where we were getting on a plane and we saw a woman wearing our shoes, and we were just, so excited to see them out in the world. And we spoke to this woman, and she just really connected with the mission, and she had her own story, and it just resonated with her and the impact, and she just wanted to stand like with change. And for me, like, I want to see more of that. I want to see more of that in the world, more of those stories. And yeah, so in 4 years, I hope that I'm looking out and I'm seeing the shoes, but I'm hearing the stories, and I'm feeling that, power of the collective.
All right, well, we've only got like a minute left. And so I'm curious if we can just do like a lightning fast analogy. You're both runners, you're running a business. Are there similarities that you've noticed? How can we drive this metaphor home for people? What are the similarities between running a race and running a business?
Yeah, I think that what I would say the big similarities are that the race, unlike the 100 meters, you can have a bad start and you can recover. You have to be focused on the goal, and on where you're trying to go. You really have to stay in your lane. You cannot be constantly looking around at your competitors, or they're going to pass you by. You do what you're supposed to do. And then that also sometimes it feels like you're all alone out there, but there is a really great big team that's right there supporting you every step of the way. And that may be your team at work, your team at home, but you have so much more support than you think. And at the end of the day, whether you win or you lose, you're gonna be okay. Just you'll be just fine. And I think that, you know, part of being an entrepreneur is, and being an Olympian for Allison, or being an athlete, you know, is that bit of crazy that makes it where if this doesn't work, the world ends. And you have to believe that that's what's going to make you run through walls. But I think the truth is, you can use it as a form of motivation, but you're going to be just fine, whether your business works or doesn't work, whether you win the race or lose the race. Like, you're going to be okay. And more than likely, it's just going to be a learning. You'll be able to take it into the next thing. Sorry, Sissy, I jumped on that,
Amazing.
but
Allison, any final thoughts there on the parallels?
No, I mean, I feel like you took them all. But I just really lean into that idea of team, because I feel like in my career, I always felt like, you know, you're getting that medal and you're out there by yourself, but there's so many people who pour into you, who are a part of that process, who are experts in their area that allow you to get up there. And so I think that's what it's about. We're a team, we're working together, and, you know, we have that common goal, and there's so much of the journey along the way that we want to embrace, and where the magic happens. And yeah, it's really special.
Amazing. Well, if I could just say thank you on behalf of the hundreds of emojis flying through the chat right now. This was such an incredible story. And the thing that you said early on that's going to stay in my mind for years to come is that you can use your voice even if it shakes. I feel like that's a quote we're going to see all over social media after this. Thank you so much for that. You both are incredible. Thank you for being here.
Yeah,
Thank you both. You're amazing.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having us.